if you were kind of being hard on yourself and wanted to nitpick at one thing, is there one little aspect of your game in college that you wish could have been a little better? What would that be?
One aspect that could have been better. I mean, I look at, and I'm going to be critical because of the way I see the game today. I wish I had more well-rounded my abilities, putting the ball on the floor. I wish I'd have been able to shoot it more from the outside. Now, a lot of this is things that I could do, but at that time, as I mentioned, Coach Henson was like I shot my first three and I missed it, and Coach took me out and was like, "Hey, Deon, that's not your job.
Yeah.
We need you here." But I would say if I had to nitpick on one thing on myself is I wish I had worked harder.
Okay.
And I worked hard, but I wish I had been that guy that loved the game enough, like Terrence Shannon Jr.
Yeah.
or an Ayo Dosunmu. Those guys that love this so much that they're waking up at 4:30 in the morning and going into the gym, which we couldn't do at that time. But I'm just saying that type of love for the game. I enjoyed the competition. I enjoyed getting in there and battling and fighting with guys, but I didn't really work as hard at loving the game as I should have. And I think that is, well, it's because I saw the game as a way to get out of my community where I was living and better my life and the life of my family. So it was more of a tool than a passion.
Right. Yeah. That's a great answer, but I just thought you're going to keep it simple and say free throws.
Well, that would have worked too.
All right, everybody, before this episode officially gets started, I need to talk to you about a man named Corey Mason, an establishment that he owns called the Tree Hive. Now, Corey Mason is a producer of mead, cider, and wine, but his place is mead-focused. It is a mead-focused winery. It is in Brockton, Illinois. We'll get to Brockton in a minute, but first of all, what is mead, you may ask? I know I didn't know what it was up until about a year or so ago when his place opened up. Well, it's an alcoholic beverage made by fermenting honey and water, and he has perfected it. He's got it down to a science. You walk into his establishment, you see medals, trophies all over the place from awards he's won, contests he's won for his mead. Now, you may be asking yourself, what flavors does he have? You name it. He is constantly experimenting and making different types of flavors, and I'm not exaggerating. When I do go in there and he asks me what I want, I say, I don't care, because I've never had one that isn't amazing and tastes awesome. So he's got them bottled up. He serves. He makes all kinds of different things for you, and it is, again, the mead that he makes is outstanding. And you'll be able to tell that, like I said, with all the trophies and all the awards and medals and everything all over his establishment. Now, the next thing is, you may be thinking to yourself, where is this place? Where is Brockton, Illinois? Well, it's in East Central Illinois, but I will say this. If you look up Brockton and you think, oh man, that's too far, I'm not going there. Well, guess what? His bottles are being sold at many locations in the Champaign area. He's got Benny's Beverage Depots in Champaign, Bloomington, Peoria, and Springfield. It's being sold there. It's being sold at Common Grounds in Urbana, the Hive Honey Boutique in Mahomet, Gateway Liquor in Charleston. You can find it on tap at Poor Brothers locations, Triptych in Savoy, 7th Street Cider and Meat in Springfield. So the word is spreading about him and his outstanding product. And so I highly recommend buying at one of those places or making it to Brockton and checking out his establishment. Again, it is the Tree Hive. Corey Mason is the owner. It is 115 West 3rd Street in Brockton, Illinois. So do yourself a favor. Also, this Thursday, it's Cigar and Bourbon Night, September 5th, Thursday night, this Thursday, from 5 to 9. So, again, I can't recommend it more highly. It is amazing stuff, and it's a little hidden gem there and in Brockton, and like I said, it's spreading, and it's do yourself a favor and get a bottle sometime because it is outstanding. So, without further ado, let's get this episode started. Now, very, very quickly, as you may know, this is episode 1 of Heath Barn Hoopcast. My former podcast is no longer. This is the Heath Barn Hoopcast. And usually these episodes will come out Monday nights and Thursday nights, and they will be 2 parts. But I thought, hey, you know what? It's Labor Day. Maybe people are cooking out. It's Deon Thomas, for the love of God. So why don't we just listen to the whole episode? So this week, I'm putting out the whole episode on Monday, today here, Labor Day. And from here on out, they will come out on part 1 on Monday and part 2 on Thursday with the rest of the players. So enjoy this episode. Enjoy it. It was great to have him on. He was an amazing guest. So, we're off.
Okay, well, I am here with Illini great, Illini career scoring leader, and so on, analyst with Brian Barnhart for the Fighting Illini. It is Deon Thomas. Deon, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, John, it's a pleasure to be on.
All right, great. Well, when I do these things, I kind of just like to start from the top at the beginning here. So maybe if you want to give a little bit about childhood, growing up, things like that. Like how young were you when you started playing, and when did you kind of get the itch for basketball, and when did you realize that it was something you wanted to stick with and see how far you could go with it?
This is always a story. People are surprised when I tell them what I'm going to tell you right now. But I grew up in Chicago,
Yes.
on the west side of Chicago, which we know is kind of a hotbed, along with the city itself for basketball players. But I will have to say, in the beginning, I was not one of those. I didn't start playing basketball until my freshman year in high school.
Oh, man.
And the reason I started playing, I played baseball before, and big baseball fan back then, even today. I grew up watching a lot of baseball on television with my grandmother, my great grandfather. So that was kind of my first love. Played in the league, and actually the way I got into basketball, I was on the way home after a game. And my older brother, who was in high school by this time, played basketball and football at Robeson High School. And he was out playing in the park with some other guys on the court, and they needed an extra person so, they could play a 5-on-5 and play full court. And so after this game, my brother and I on the way home was like, dude, you don't understand how good of a basketball player you are. You need to start playing basketball and not baseball. So he convinced my mom to send me to Simeon, and that's when my basketball career started. Freshman year tryouts.
Wow. Okay. Well, when you were, I didn't have this down in my notes here, but when you played baseball, okay, a couple of quick questions. When you were a freshman, I guess, how tall were you? And because obviously you're 6'9", right? So, and then also when you played baseball, I guess, how good were you? What position did you play? All that kind of stuff.
I'll answer the second one first.
Okay.
Had a really between 7th grade and 8th grade had a growth spurt. And then between 8th grade and freshman summer had a growth spurt. But when I played baseball, I pitched, played first base. And, when you're, Little League, they kind of stick you where they need you. So I've done a little back catching and also played a little right field. But when I went into Simeon, I would say I was probably around 6'3",
Yeah.
6'4". At that time, was quite thin, of course. I mean, we were, once I made the team, along with one of my other teammates, this will tell you how thin I was. My teammates, guys give you nicknames. You earn a nickname or they give you one. And so Manute Bol, if you remember, was big at that time in the league. So they were trying to decide between myself and my friend Eric Askew who was going to be called Manute.
Oh yeah. Oh,
And
I
let's
remember
just say,
Manute.
yes. And let's just say Eric won out on the Manute thing because not a nickname I wanted to have.
Right. It's funny, when you're little, this is another little side note, but you talk about a unique player in the NBA. I mean, I remember being little and seeing him just thinking, what is this? And then sometimes he'd go out there and launch a three or something, and it's like he was almost like a character more than you know what I mean? But
Oh,
yeah, interesting player there. But yeah, he was skinny. Okay, well, all right. So you were a freshman when you started playing. I was going to ask, and I've said this to a couple other guys I've had on here from Chicago, being around Champaign, but where I live, if I look out of my back door, I see a cornfield. So I told him, I'm like, if you could maybe explain growing up, playing in Chicago, but if you didn't really start playing until you were a freshman, maybe just kind of explain playing high school basketball in Chicago and how all that kind of prepared you for all the things that would come later.
Well, I definitely played. Once I started playing basketball, I mean, it's like anywhere else in the inner city. I mean, you have outlets. So you're either hanging out with your friends on the corner, which was not one of those things I wanted to do. So after I started playing, hung out with my friends a lot, and of course my high school teammates. So that meant playing a lot of basketball outside. So that was pretty much how we spent our time. Either we were hanging out together, or we were on the basketball courts. And you talk about when you look out. I saw project buildings. So
Right.
wasn't really a whole lot else to do if you were trying to stay out of trouble. And my brother, was really a great guide for me to stay out of trouble. And then once I found basketball in Hambrick, we spent a lot of our times. It's not like today where you're doing AAU and things of that nature. You were or these private lessons that all of these kids have. You were with your high school coaches and with your teammates. And I think that was a big saving grace for me, because it kept us out of the street. It kept us occupied. It kept us in the building. It kept us working out. And I was fortunate enough to have, Irvin Small, who was at Simeon at the time, along with Nick Anderson.
Right.
So we had guys that that we could look up to and that helped us get ready. And that was one of Hambrick's big things anyway. You had an upperclassman that would take and teach a freshman. And he was kind of your mentor, your guide. And that was a really big help for us. So I spent a lot of time, really almost 6 days a week, with Irvin Small and with my high school coach. Even on Sunday mornings, we were out playing and learning how to play this game.
Right. Well, then I was going to ask you too. This just kind of popped in my head. The name Benji Wilson.
Yes.
Okay, that was tragic. But as far as the type of player, now was he older than Nick Anderson, or were they the same age? Or
Nick and Benji were really good friends. I mean, Nick transferred from Prosser to play with Benji at Simeon. And so they would have been playing together. I think Nick is actually 1 year younger than Benji. Benji's senior year, I was in 8th grade, the year he died. And so Nick transferred to Simeon for his senior year to play with Benji. So they're right around that same age.
Yeah, that's why he always wore 25.
Well, yes, that was what started it.
Right.
You got the number one player in the nation, really good friends with Nick, was supposed to, as far as I know, to be going to Illinois. So it was really just, kind of honoring Benji, the Simeon connection between the connection between Simeon and Illinois. And so if Benji was doing it, Nick wore the number in honor of his friend. And then, of course, I wore it after Nick
Right.
for that very same reason to honor Ben Wilson, who, in my opinion, is one of the best basketball players I've ever seen.
Yes. I was going to ask. I mean, it's all speculative, but can you compare him? I mean, how good do you think he could have been, and how did he remind you of anyone, his style of game or anything like that when he was in high school? Or
Well, I'll tell you what they wrote in the Chicago Sun-Times, and this sticks in my memory from the time I was a kid. The Sun-Times described described Benji as Magic Johnson with a jump shot.
Oh my, yeah.
So that'll tell you the type of player he was at 6'8", 6'9", that could play every position pretty much on the court. He was a natural passer. He made his teammates around him better. I remember the first time I had really seen Benji play was the city championship game in '84 when they went downstate and they beat Carver. And watching him, it was like poetry,
Yeah.
And how he moved. And yeah, he wasn't the leading scorer or things like that, but he made everyone else around him better, kind of like LeBron James does.
Right.
But of course he's a lot thinner than LeBron. But a lot of that same skill set, very Scottie Pippen-ish, very much like Magic Johnson. And that was what we got to see growing up as kids, as young players. Watching him and watching Simeon do their thing.
Right. Okay. Well, if we kind of move on into high school here, if you want to discuss your high school career a little bit. I mean, I know all these things, but you can maybe let the people know how far did you guys make it. Some of your accomplishments, obviously.
Sure.
There were a lot of them, but and then maybe after that, when did you start kind of hearing from colleges and things like that?
Well, freshman year, which is a Simeon tradition, you do not play varsity your freshman year at Simeon. That didn't change until Jabari Parker. But, of course, by that time, my high school coach had retired, and Robert Smith was then the head coach. But, I went in as a freshman. We had a really good freshman class. Like I said, it was my first year playing. So worked really hard to just learn the game and learn the basics. And I'm thankful to Coach Hambrick and definitely to Irvin Small for doing so. And at that time, it's not like it is today where your freshman teams can go downstate and all of those things. So the end of our season was winning the Chicago Public League Championship. And so that was my first time winning the championship at Simeon. And then that's when, you kind of start getting a little bit of the noticement by college coaches, especially when you're I went in at 6'4". By the time I finished, I was a 6'5", 6'6" freshman that displayed, I guess, some skills, because when other coaches would come in to see Nick or Irvin or Deon Butler, they were always asking Coach Hambrick about me. So I guess that's the times that I really started getting noticed was from freshman year to sophomore year. That's when the letters started coming in. But I wouldn't say there was any real push for recruitment or anything like that until like my junior year.
Right.
Junior year, of course, we win the city championship again. Then we went downstate, which is where we lost to Eric Anderson and St. Francis de Sales in double overtime.
Eric Anderson went to Indiana.
Yep.
Correct.
Yep. He ended up playing at Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
And then senior year, and again, we got to make reference to the difference in the times. There were only two divisions in the city of Chicago at that time. So either you won city or you went home. And that's pretty much what happened my senior year. King beat us in the city championship. That's when they had Jamie Brandon and Johnny Selvey and Fred Schofield and Ahmad Sharif. They had a really, really good team.
Yeah.
And knocked us out in the city championship. So that was really the end of the accolades from a
Gotcha.
team standpoint. But from an individual standpoint, I was voted Mr. Basketball in 1989 for the state of Illinois. Was also Parade All-American. And for those young viewers, they will not remember Parade, but that was a huge deal at that time.
Yes.
It was almost as big. It was almost as big as being named a McDonald's All-American,
Right.
which I also was a McDonald's All-American. And we went and played the game in Kansas City, and that was the first time I'd seen Kansas City, but actually liked it. And I played alongside guys like Shaquille O'Neal, Kenny Anderson,
Right.
and some other greats at that time. But, I left and graduated from high school my senior year as the number 3 player in the nation by most publications, behind Kenny Anderson and Shaquille O'Neal.
Right. Very, very good. I was going to ask, I had that down there. I was going to ask you about the McDonald's All-American game, just kind of what that experience was like. And were you on the same team as Shaq, or were you on the other team?
No, thank God I was on the same team.
Nice.
I mean, I'll tell you, it was an amazing experience. Just all of the things and visiting the Ronald McDonald House and seeing all of the things that, I guess McDonald's is not known for, but really getting an opportunity to see all of the backdoor things that they do as far as supporting children and, so that was great. And I hope they're still doing that. I don't know if they are or not, but it was amazing to see how they are they're not just selling burgers. They're doing some things to really make a change and a difference in society, which is what is commendable. But as far as the basketball is amazing. I mean, of course, coming out of the city of Chicago, and I give you a quick story. Coming out of the Chicago Public League, I'm used to playing against talent and especially at that time, very highly talented teams with Division I basketball players on basically every team. And so I was at the McDonald's All-American game. They're interviewing all of the players, and we had not had a practice yet. But one of the reporters asked me, "Hey, what do you think about being surrounded by this level of talent?" And my response, I guess a little arrogantly, and appreciative also of, Chicago basketball and just its history. I was like, man, I'm from the Chicago Public League. I play against guys like this every day. This is not something new. And then we had our first practice. And
it wasn't like it was every day.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, to be honest, it was. With the exception of one guy. And I was in practice. And Shaquille, I don't know why he would call everybody big bro. And he was like, yeah, big, especially since you're the biggest person and out of all of us. And he'd be like, big bro. He's like, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. And we were doing the drill where you would toss the ball off the backboard, break out in transition, score a basket on the other end, and then you'd come back against defense.
Mm-hmm.
So he was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw the ball off the rim, go down the court. I'm going to dunk it. I'm going to come back down. I'm going to get the ball in the post. I'm going to elbow. It was Matt Winstrom who was going to be defending him on the defensive end. At that time, of course, Shaquille O'Neal is like the number 1 or number 2 player in the nation.
Mm-hmm.
But Matt Winstrom was the number 1 player in Texas.
Okay.
Please explain that to me, seeing Shaquille O'Neal played in Texas.
Right. That doesn't make sense.
Makes no kind of sense whatsoever.
But media does that sometimes.
Yeah. So he says, well, I'm going to do these things, come down. I'm going to elbow Matt. I'm going to knock him to the floor. I'm going to dunk the ball and make it hit him in the face. And I'm like, yeah, right. Okay. Literally. Throws the ball off the board, goes down, dunks it, comes down, elbows Matt, knocks him to the floor, dunks it. The ball hit him in his face, busts Matt's nose. So Matt leaves practice. That evening, I got back to the hotel. I called my brother. I
Yeah.
say, remember the name Shaquille O'Neal.
Yeah.
I say,
Oh, my.
make sure you put that on the books because this dude is a beast.
Right.
You know, and of course, I think if I'm not mistaken, he won the MVP in that game. I mean, doing some amazing stuff, getting the ball off the board, taking it full court. And this is somebody that was almost 300 pounds at 7'1", 7'2", and dunking it on the other end. But I will say this: I ended that game with a double-double, 10 points, 10 rebounds, and our team won. So he got the MVP, but I felt pretty doggone good with my game as well. And then, of course, on to Illinois.
Right. Man, that's really good. That's a good story. I thought you were gonna say he shattered the backboard. Well, at least he didn't shatter the backboard. You guys didn't have to like hold up practice or anything. But okay.
No, exactly, because at that time wasn't no breakaway rims.
Yeah.
Like like all of the ones he broke in the NBA.
Yeah.
I'm surprised he didn't break a rim.
Right. My son is 7, and he's real into just. He's real into basketball, but he's been YouTubing just old school stuff. And there's this one where I don't know. He was going to be on like that. What was it called? The one Ahmad Rashad hosted back in the day, like that.
Oh yes.
But Ahmad Rashad's there.
Stuff.
Inside stuff. There you go. And my son's watching it, and Ahmad's like talking to Shaq, and Shaq just goes up there and dunks it and just shatters the backboard like it was nothing. Like I'm just like, how do you it's just his strength is just you just don't see guys like that. But
no, you not.
Right. Okay, well, I'm obviously not going to go there with all of the Iowa stuff because here's the thing. I had TJ Wheeler on, and I feel like if he'll let me know, like he let me know his thoughts on it. So I feel like my audience, they know everybody's thoughts on that. But with the recruiting process, I guess I will ask though, like 1 to 10, scale of 1 to 10, how crazy was it just in general? And then is there like a story you're comfortable sharing just about whether it was like a visit somewhere or anything like that? Because, I've had guys, I had like Jens Kuyava on, and he talked about going to the White House when he visited Maryland. Or is there anything like that, that you're comfortable talking about during the process? And like I said, 1 to 10, kind of just as a teenager going through all that, how crazy was all of it?
Well, the great part about it is I had Bob Hambrick as kind of a buffer. He had rules to how teams would do things and how they would be recruited. So you weren't allowed to just, bully over us or things that we do. Now, of course, their coaches snuck around and did things, and that includes my buddy that was at Iowa. But like you said, TJ knows. So I'm sure you got a mouthful on that. But it's definitely not one of those things that I fear talking about. I mean, because I didn't do anything wrong. Jimmy Collins didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
But you talk about stories. I don't have any that I particularly should share. Let's say I had a great time on every trip. I will say, people don't realize my top 5 when I was coming out of high school was Arizona, UCLA, Illinois, Iowa, and Minnesota.
Okay.
Kind of in that order. And, my grandmother told me, she was like, hey, well, if you go to Arizona or UCLA, I am not going to see you because my grandmother didn't fly. So there was nowhere in the world she was going to fly. So that kind of ixnayed those 2 off of the list. Didn't even take an official visit to them once I had the conversation with her. But I did take my visit to Minnesota, Iowa, and of course, Illinois. Loved Clem Haskins up in Minnesota. Had a great time on my trip. They took us through these tunnels. When we were walking, and I'm like, well, what are we doing down here? And they were like, well, this is how you're going to get to class in the winter.
Okay.
And I said, excuse me? I'm from Chicago. What do you mean? They were like, no, this is a lot colder and more snow than you get in Chicago. And of course, Hambrick always told us you never decline or accept an offer while you're on your visit. So I didn't. I just kept my mouth shut, and I was like, oh, okay. Finished my tour. I got back to Chicago. I called Coach Haskins. I said, Coach, I really, really like you. I love the campus, but I cannot come to Minnesota.
Okay.
If I got to go through tunnels to get the no, I'm not doing that. The weather's crazy. It's nuts. Not doing that.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, nope. So then my trip to Iowa was great. They did some things, like I guess they're kind of okay now where you can put kids in well, they are okay because you could, you see the kids all taking pictures in the uniforms and things like that. You couldn't do that back then.
Right.
They had it all up on the scoreboard. Deon, number 25, Deon Thomas, all this other stuff that you were not supposed to be doing back then. They did that, which I thought was pretty cool. And they didn't do that at Illinois. They didn't do it at no other trip I took. So I was like, man, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But had a good time on that trip. And then I went to take my official visit to Illinois. And a lady, my history teacher, who I truly appreciate to this day, she showed me and forcefully, I might add, the importance of education.
Right.
My grandparents, who didn't go to school past 7th grade, were always pro education. My mother the same way, but Miss Washington took it to another step. I spent my official visit at Illinois in the library.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Miss Washington wanted her history paper when I got back to class on Monday.
Huh.
So I learned the library at Illinois long before I had ever been to camps.
Yeah. Okay. So the number 3 player in the country, McDonald's All-American, takes his visit to Illinois and spends it in the library.
Yes.
Wow.
He spent it in the library because Miss Washington wanted her paper. So then the very next weekend, I took an unofficial visit back to campus, and I, in between my library time, I got to see campus and different things like that. So this trip, I came back and got to visit friends, got to visit, Irvin Small, Nick Anderson, of course, and got to see the other side of campus, the fun side of campus.
Yes.
And then I was like, okay, I like it here. And that was pretty much the decision, coming back. I mean, Kenny Battle and Steve Bartle also actually played a huge role in me ending up at Illinois. But, you asked if recruiting was crazy. Not so much, not as crazy as it could have been, but it was crazy enough for me.
Oh, very good. Very good. That's a great story too about your first visit going there. And all right, so we choose Illinois, and you take right to it, obviously, because your freshman year you get 15.1, 6.8 boards, 1.8 blocks, 0.6 assists. Though you're going to work on that a little bit, but
No, I'm gonna tell you. It's so funny you say that. I'm gonna tell you what. And TJ gives me crap about this to this day.
Yeah.
One game freshman year I think I had 5 or 6 assists, and coach got on me.
Yeah.
Coach got on me. He was like, Deon, that's not your job.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I said, okay.
I do what's best for the team. What's best for the team is for me to put the ball in the basket. So there you go.
This is exactly. And that was one thing I could say about Coach Henson. Coach Henson, when you had a role, he wanted you to play your role to the T.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever your role was. If you're a defender, be the best defender on the court. I mean, it's not like today. Today, guys have so much freedom. I got a story for you on that one too with Coach Underwood's first game. But Coach Henson wanted you to play the way he wanted you to play, and it helped a lot of people, and it hurt some people because you weren't allowed to use a lot of creativity, but he just wanted the best, and it was very machine-like in how we operated. And, it served him well and served us well for the most part. But I think if the reins were a little bit looser,
Mm-hmm.
we have really, really have done some good things.
Right. Well, like I said, you took to it right away, obviously, because your freshman year you were great. But in your opinion, what was the biggest adjustment from high school to college playing? I mean, yeah.
The biggest adjustment really had to be gaining strength,
Yeah.
being able to play through at that time. I think the Big Ten is probably still, if not the most physical conference, it's still right up there.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember Coach Henson, and if you're my actual freshman year, the university forced me to redshirt.
Right.
And so they used to always tell me, hey, come to the weight room, get in here and work and this and this. My kind of silent protest and, well, immature protest. I didn't work out or do the things that I should have done. I spent most of my freshman year as a regular student, as a freshman, regular freshman on campus, going to class, going to parties and, kind of doing all of the things that I did not understand were really important, because we never lift weights in high school.
Right.
You were better than the person that was in front of you. And Coach Collins would tell me every day, you need to get in the weight room. You need to come, make sure you're over here working out. Coach Nagy, you need to be over here working out. You need to be doing, please, I'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
And as you stated, the numbers would say, especially as a freshman, I did pretty doggone well. But I will say this, that would have probably been another 5 points if I was stronger and did the things that the coaches told me to do or wanted me to do. I remember being in the game, playing against Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, they had Perry Carter. I don't know if you remember Perry Carter.
I do.
And Treg Lee.
Yeah, man, those are good names there. That's a long ago.
Man, Perry Carter had the biggest arms
Mm-hmm.
I've ever seen on a basketball player, probably ever.
Yeah.
And I remember defending him in the post. And I'm trying to, what we would call a swim technique, which is actually illegal today. But, you wrap your inside arm around their post arm and then you swim through so you can get defensive position.
Right.
I couldn't move his arm. I was trying to swim and I would get stuck up on his arm. So I sub out and I go sit down, and Coach Collins leans over. He was like, told your ass to get in the gym.
Exactly. Oh, that's good.
I'll say this. We won the game, which was the important part. And I finished, I think I had maybe 20 something that game and blocked his shot a couple times. I was like, but I still kicked his butt.
Right. Man, I remember, I haven't thought about those old Ohio State teams, but man, they were really good there, because, you had Jimmy Jackson too, right, on those teams. Yeah, I mean, they were pretty loaded. I was going to ask you to, I mean, I'll jump ahead, then I'll come back, but you mentioned trying to guard him. Like, who was the toughest, like when you were in college, a guy that you just did not want to guard, or the toughest guy you had to guard that you can think of?
I never had anyone that I didn't want to guard. I liked the thing I liked most about basketball was the competition. That's how, we grow up in Chicago. I mean, that's how my brother taught me is the competition. So I always wanted to test myself against other guys. But the toughest guy I had to guard from a physical standpoint was probably Chris Webber.
Yeah.
Just because he was just, so fluid, so long, so explosive. It would have to be him. From a post standpoint, with just, a bunch of moves and know how to play, and that knew my game and I knew his game, would have to be Juwan Howard.
Yes.
Because our games were so similar that it was,
Right.
the only thing he didn't have was a turnaround fadeaway. I didn't teach him that.
Yeah.
But the toughest person, and I'm sure TJ probably said the same thing if you asked him this question, Glenn Robinson.
Yeah.
The big dog was, I mean, just amazing in every aspect
Right.
of the game. He could put it on the floor, he could shoot it from deep, he could drive it. He's a 3-level scorer. Well, 4 actually, because he was a great free throw shooter. So
Right.
you couldn't foul him. I mean, so those will probably be the toughest guys that I had to defend in college.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. Big Ten was loaded back then, man. There were so many studs.
Ooh. Yes.
Yeah. He actually mentioned he was a guard, so he mentioned for him it was. I figured he'd say Glenn Robinson also. He mentioned him, but he said Calbert Chaney because he said like Bobby, because he said Bobby Knight. He's like I'd get hit 6 times before they even started running their play. Like go down the court. So
that's that motion, boy.
Oh, I know, it's great. Yeah. All right, I'm looking at some of these stats here, and again, you're the leading scorer in the history of Illinois, so. You get 15 there, then 19.4 sophomore year, 18.3, 19.6. So just extremely consistent. Rebounds are always 6.8, 6.9, 8, and 6.9. So for your career, 18 and 7.2. So, I mean, just an amazing career. If you were kind of being hard on yourself and wanted to nitpick at one thing, is there one little aspect of your game in college that you wish could have been a little better? What would that be?
One aspect that could have been better. I mean, I look at, and I'm going to be critical because of the way I see the game today. I wish I had more well-rounded my abilities, putting the ball on the floor. I wish I'd have been able to shoot it more from the outside. Now, a lot of this is things that I could do. But at that time, as I mentioned, Coach Henson was like I shot my first 3 and I missed it. And Coach took me out. Was like, hey, Deon, that's not your job.
Yeah.
We need you here. But I would say if I had to nitpick on one thing on myself is I wish I had worked harder.
Okay.
And I worked hard. But I wish I had been that guy that loved the game enough, like Terrence Shannon Jr.
Yeah.
or an Io DeSumo. Those guys that love this so much that they're waking up at 4:30 in the morning and going into the gym, which we couldn't do at that time. But I'm just saying that type of love for the game. I enjoyed the competition. I enjoyed getting in there and battling and fighting with guys, but I didn't really work as hard at loving the game as I should have. And I think that is, well, it's because I saw the game as a way to get out of my community where I was living and better my life and the life of my family. So it was more of a tool than a passion.
Right. Yeah. That's a great answer, but I just thought you're going to keep it simple and say free throws.
Well, that would have worked too.
Yeah. Well, okay. All those years though, you have to have like a favorite game, a favorite memory on the court, things like that. What's something you could pinpoint for that? Like a game, and then like maybe like an individual like a moment or like a play or something like that.
Right. Well, I mean, my favorite game has to be and moment, to be quite honest, is the Andy Kaufman basket.
Yes.
It's an easy pick for me because everyone knows the situation that had gone on with Iowa. We're at home, we're battling with them. The ball bounced off my shoulder, goes in the basket, and I'm totally distraught. Because the last thing I wanted to do was let them beat me. And I was saved. I was saved by a great pass from TJ Wheeler, who played quarterback in high school, and by Andy Kaufman, who could just score in a phone booth.
Yes. And wasn't bashful about it either.
Oh no, not at all. Well, you're a great scorer like Andy, man. You shouldn't be bashful about it.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that would be my favorite moment. And again, because it was huge with everything that was swirling around it. My favorite game. Favorite game. One of my favorite games. I don't know if I have a favorite, but we were playing Ohio State in Assembly Hall and playing against Lawrence Funderburk. This was freshman or sophomore year. Can't really pinpoint. But when we were coming out of high school, and it was, again, back to the competition thing, Lawrence and I bounced back and forth between third and fourth being ranked in high school.
Okay.
And so we went back and forth, back and forth. So this was an opportunity for me to test myself against him.
Yeah, that's another great name from back in those days too, man. He was a stud, left-handed, strong, and yeah.
And just had him sitting on the bench most of the game. So I kicked his butt and we won.
There you go.
So that would have to be one of the favorites. I mean, he and of course, anytime I get to beat up on Northwestern was good.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, did you let's see here. We haven't really said, we've mentioned him a little bit, but for Coach Henson, do you want to maybe give maybe some thoughts on him and his style and things like that? What he meant to you and everything.
And I'll tell anyone this. I've had people ask me this in previous interviews. Well, how was your relationship with Coach Henson when you were at Illinois? It was respectful.
Yeah.
At that time, it was different than it is now. It was, if you were getting called to the head coach's office, you were in some kind of trouble.
Yeah.
You had done something wrong. So there was this buffer with the assistant coaches, between the assistant coaches and the head coaches. But after I left and graduated from Illinois, is when I truly began to understand and recognize the teachings of Lou Henson and what he wanted from us and the people that he wanted us to be and become. And that's when I fell in love with the man.
Yeah.
It went from respect to love because all of the lessons that he, gave us weren't really they were about basketball, but they weren't, they were about life.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to take some of the lessons that he had, instilled in us and utilize them in my adult life was what made that more important and more special. Now, I will say this. I wish he had let me shoot more 3-point shots.
Yeah.
I mean, especially since I shot them in practice. I made them in practice so I could do it, but that just wasn't his style of play, which leads me to the story. And I was telling you about Brad Underwood. I'm on the call, my first game with him.
Mm-hmm.
He comes over he was like, Deon, after the game, I got a question for you. And I'm like, okay, coach, cool, no problem. LeRon Black had like 34 points that night. I think he was like 5 for 6 from 3 or something like some number, but he had like 30 plus points. And coach sits down. The first thing he says is, wouldn't you have loved to have played for me? Oh, I'm glad we weren't on air because I cursed. I was like, fuck yes. To be able to go out and he was like, because I heard you could shoot. I was like, I can, and I could then too, but just wasn't the way wasn't the way coach played. I was like, man, I had 3,000 points if I played for you.
Yeah. Oh my. Yeah, if he's letting LeRon Black let her rip from 3, then I'd say that you would have had the green light for sure. But,
yes.
Oh my.
Like, man,
well, you had beautiful form. Yeah, you had beautiful form. So I mean, there's no reason why. I tell you, okay, real quick, I think it's kind of the game has changed so much to where I feel like it was okay. First of all, that was kind of the way Coach Henson was. First of all, agree with it or not. That's how he was. But I also think that just the game in general, having a 6'9" post player go out there and shoot threes back then wasn't common. But the thing is, if you can shoot, you can shoot, and
Right.
somewhere along the line they realized that, and now they're just, and now if you watch an NBA game, if you can't shoot threes, it's tough for you to be out there, So
No, you're right. And I'll tell you when I realized the change and the shift in the game. When I graduated in 1994, and I got drafted by the Mavericks, of course, as you know, but I chose to go and play in Spain. And our first practice, we're in practice, and I'm defending the other guy that was, the Edison, the red. Our colors were red and white when I played for Manresa. And so I'm defending Slavko Kotnik. I remember his name like it was yesterday. And I'm killing him in the post. Just killing him. Every time he tries to post up, I block a shot, I dunk on him, all of the above. When transition, he stops at the 3-point line, bam, knocks down a three. He stops at the 3-point line again, bam, knocks down a three. And Salva Maldonado was my coach. And we were getting ready to play, I think, Barcelona or someone. And he didn't speak Spanish, so he had my buddy come over and translate. This is not the freaking United States. Big guys can shoot over here. Step out to the 3-point line. At that point, that's when I realized, okay, the game is different. And that game over there in 1994 that I was introduced to is what you're seeing today.
Right.
Tony Kukoc was still over there playing when I was playing. Dino Raja was still playing when I was playing. Shit, I played against Arvydas Sabonis when he was in Madrid and I was there and in Barcelona. So that was the norm over there, and now you see it here. The American game has become the European game, which I think is in some ways a lot better anyway, because I think you create basketball players. You don't create positions. Back in my day, man, if you were 6'6" and above, you were on the post.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that transition from then to now, and I love it. But I wish I could have been a part of it.
Yeah, yeah. I agree completely. That is funny too. Your coach told you that. So, we'll get into the overseas stuff here in a second. But, so after Illinois here, I guess we'll move along here. You get your senior year. You get drafted 28th by Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
Opted to go play in Europe. I guess just kind of what went into that decision ultimately.
Well, okay. And I guess it was complicated for most people to understand this because most people look at the NBA as NBA or bust when you're coming up and you're playing college sports. But it was never that for me. I always, coming from where I'm from, I grew up in what they, call a concrete jungle. So I always wanted to travel. I always wanted to see, the rest of the world. Had a small taste of it when I was a senior in high school. Our high school team went to play, I think it was maybe 10 days in Amsterdam. So I always had that itch in me to go back and see the rest of the world. And so the 11th hour, the Dallas Mavericks are waiting for me to sign my contract. And my agent, Mark Bartelstein, was like, hey, I have to tell you about, before you do this offer from a team in Spain. Okay. He tells the terms. The terms are actually better than what I would have made my rookie year. And then he told me, he's like, hey, well, you have the option, you can come back, and after you go over, you can play a year, then you can come back. I called Jimmy Collins and I talked to Coach, and Coach was like, hey, Deon, he was like, basically, at the end of the day, you want to be able to do what you want to do and not what you have to do when it comes to work and life and things after your career is over. So I was like, okay. So decided to go and play in Spain. Again, it was more money. It was more of an opportunity for me to travel and see. And then the idea the plan was to come back after that year and go to Dallas. But if you remember in '95, the NBA went on strike.
Yep, I remember.
NBA goes on strike. I go back to Spain, different team, but I go back to Spain, and this is when I met the person that would eventually become my wife, and so
Okay.
stayed there to be with her. Stayed there because I enjoyed and loved living in Spain. I loved living abroad. I was like, you know what? It's all that's not that necessary. I'm making an extremely good living and don't have to pay taxes. They're giving me a car. So, yeah. I mean, and if it wasn't for my mother, to be quite honest, I might actually still be living there.
Really? That's great. And I get to shoot threes.
Exactly. You got to do all of the stuff that I was doing on the playground.
Yeah. Well, man, I mean, it's so many people don't make, you just do what's best for you and their life decisions, I mean, things like that. And if you're over there enjoying it, making a ton of money, having fun playing basketball, then why would you leave? I mean,
exactly. And that was the way, and that was my thought process. I was like, I'm enjoying this.
right.
I got to bring my family, like my brothers and cousins, my mom, people that have probably never had gotten an opportunity to see or do what I was doing. I got to bring them over. So there were far more positives than negatives.
Right. Well, and looking at all this stuff too, you are one of the most, you've had one of the best careers in the European leagues of anyone from America.
Did pretty well. I can't complain.
Yeah. I'm looking here, 2-time EuroLeague champion, 04-05.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to ask you to get into all because it is a little confusing about how you go from team to team, how all that stuff works over there. But looking at Israeli League champion, three-time Israeli Cup champion, and so it's just one of the most successful American pros of all time in those leagues. So, do you have? I was going to ask if you had a story from over there, possibly like on the court, and then maybe one also off the court that Americans may find very interesting because of all the differences over there.
On the court, I would say on the court. Yeah, I won the championships with Maccabi, and they were great. But it would really have to be probably my rookie year there, when I was playing with Manresa, going in and knocking Barcelona out of the playoffs, and then we eventually got beat the next round. But that was the team that I was playing for had never accomplished that feat. So to be a part of that as a rookie, and then to be voted to the All-Star game as a rookie were, things that on-court things that were huge for me, because it I won't say it validated, but it gave me a sense of, hey, I can play at home, but I can play over here too. And gave me a feeling of being one of the best players in the world, even though I wasn't playing in the NBA. Off the court, off the court, this will have to be one of the best ones that will probably freak some people out, but also set some things straight.
Okay.
I loved playing in Israel. And right now, of course, everything that's going on over in the Gaza Strip will give an impression that Israel's not a safe place, or it's not a great place, which it is. So we're finished. We're in practice one day. My mom's calling me, blowing up my phone. And so after practice is done, I call my mom and I'm like, what's going on? She was like, well, there was a bombing. I just wanted to make sure that you were okay, and that Daphne and the girls were okay. What happened, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Now, we lived in Tel Aviv.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what are you talking about? So I go to our general manager and I'm like, hey, Moni, my mom's freaking out. Can you, figure out what's going on, blah, blah, blah. So he comes back to me and he says, well, let your mom know that had nothing to do with anything political or anything like that. They were trying to kill a Russian mob boss in a, in a restaurant.
In a restaurant. Oh, boy.
So, yeah, no, it was like, it had nothing to do with politics, but this is happening. So I called my mom. She was like, what? I was like, yeah, had nothing to do with politics. So, but, the impression is that, there are bombs and things going off all the time. When the truth story is that kind of stuff can happen almost anywhere. More people, I felt safer there, literally, with my wife walking around at night or my kids walking around at night than I ever did here.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the message gets kind of lost with people because they don't really know or understand. But it's a great place. That's the only real crazy off the court story.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, when you went over there to pro, I was going to ask you too, which one do you think was a bigger adjustment for you, high school to college or college to pro?
I would have to say college to pro, because it was just a different way of prepping, making sure that you're ready and that you stay ready. There's no real downtime or off season. And then playing here the way we played here and the way I grew up playing, of course, going to a European style of play, which some people may not believe, but is more physical, especially when you're one of the Americans, because the referees just don't give you the calls that they should.
Yeah.
So dealing with that and then dealing with the enhanced skill level of the players made that also a little bit more difficult. So I would have to say from college to pro.
Yeah. When you were over there, who's probably the best player you had to guard over there, you think?
The best player I had to guard over there, because I played the small forward and the power forward positions over there. So I would have to say there's a guy named Joe Alaukis. Joe's American. I think Joe played at Niagara. Older than I am, was really, really difficult to play, again, because, I'm used to, at that time, playing against guys back to the basket and them doing their thing and being able to defend that. But Joe was my height, my size, bigger, but was able to do both, but was really still fluid in putting the ball on the floor and getting to the basket. And then at the small forward position, guy named Dejan Bodiroga.
Okay.
Man, well, and many, many teams tried to get Bodie to come over to play in the NBA. I mean, this kid was 17, 18 years old playing for Barcelona. I mean, at the highest level of basketball. And I'm sure you've seen the move. They call it a sham god. They kind of reach over, crossover that everybody's trying to do now in the NBA. That is his move. Sham God wasn't even, he was still a high school kid when that boy was doing that over in Serbia and in Spain. Definitely the hardest guard because he could shoot the ball with Steph Curry distance, put the ball on the floor. I mean, he did everything. Now, he couldn't defend his way out of a paper bag. But boy, he could score with the best of them.
Real quick before I move on to the next part, how good do you think Sabonis would have been over here if he would have showed up in his prime, like for Portland, instead of in his, early to mid 30s?
Oh yeah, early to mid 30s to early 40s with 2 blown Achilles tendons.
Right.
He would have been one of the best centers ever.
Yeah.
Ever. I mean, it's not even a question. And if you ask Hubie Brown or any of those other old heads that saw him play when he was in, I'm going to call it the USR, playing for the Russian national team before they even became Lithuania. I mean, they tell you he was amazing. I mean, you had a 7'4" dude that could pass like a guard, that could handle the ball, and that could shoot it from 3. and that had a post game.
Yeah.
No, he'd have dominated most players.
Right. You think about that. They are just so far ahead of us with the style of play that it took us so long to get it to the NBA. But man, it's been like that over there for 30, 40 years,
At
Crazy.
least. I mean, shit, I've been out of school 30 years.
Right. It's crazy.
So it's like 50 years they've been
Right.
doing.
No kidding. All right, we'll move along here a little bit. But like 09, you kind of dabbled in coaching a little bit. So you want to talk about what that was like, and then we can kind of lead into what eventually led you to being hired to call the games for Illinois.
Okay. Well, coming out of when I retired, to be honest, I had no intentions of coaching. I thought I was done with basketball, but I was asked by a young man that I met in line at Starbucks to help him coach his high school team in Florida.
Okay.
So after that 1 year with him, I was like, you know what? I got to do the coaching thing because it gave me an opportunity to do with what my passion is, which is, teaching, helping young men grow and become productive. So, and that's the way I saw coaching. Yes, you're using basketball. Basketball is a tool in order to help, people grow and be productive. So that's what pushed me into coaching. And so I was talking to TJ Wheeler, and he was like, hey, I got a friend that's looking for a coach. I'll have him call you. And so it was a coaching position as well as the athletic director's position. And when you retire, you're looking for what that next part of your life is. So
Right.
I accepted that job at Lewis and Clark because I could be the athletic director as well, which would give it an opportunity to learn the administrative side of sport. And I loved it. So it fed both of my wants. It helped me work with kids that were not at the top of the rung. They were at the bottom of the rung of the ladder. To be able to help them get to college and grow and be productive and, just be men, become men instead of boys. And then to learn to be an athletic director, I thought, for me would be good. So I had a great 5-year run at Lewis and Clark before accepting a job to be the assistant coach at UIC, first under a really good friend of mine, Howard Moore. And then after that, with Steve McLean, who was the assistant coach under Tom Crean. But, Steve had an extensive coaching career as an assistant as well as a head coach. And that's kind of what drove me to it. But after a couple of years at the Division I level, I realized that it was time for me to move on. It was time for me to do something different. And that's when I got into broadcasting, first with the Big Ten Network.
Mm-hmm.
But at that time, I also was working at UIC in the College of Education, running a program called UIC Engaged. And what UIC Engaged was, and hopefully still is I would hire graduate assistants as well as undergraduate students to go out in the community where there's different community centers, elementary schools, because we only went up to the elementary school level, but helping kids with mentoring, homework help, counseling, whatever we needed to do to help them become productive. So I did that for 2 years. And then President Colleen asked me to become the community relations coordinator for the system, for the U of I system. So UIC, UIS, and UIUC. So I started doing that, really enjoyed it, working with those same community programs, but also with state and local governments on, how to better serve inner city communities through their community service and through community education. And then Josh called me, and Josh was like, hey, revamping the office in Chicago. We're looking for new development officers. And so I've currently been in this position for 6 years now. This is year 6. And during that
Gotcha.
time, of course, like I said, I was doing the TV with the Big Ten Network and started doing the radio around that same time as the Big Ten Network.
Gotcha. Man, that's a lot. The backtrack a little, like when you were when you were coaching there, and you said like D1, you kind of realized it was time to move on. What you want to elaborate a little bit about? What was it just what was it about it that kind of made you want to move on from coaching? As you can
Well,
hear,
the great thing was, I'll say this: when I worked for Howard Moore, Howard and I shared. I think she had the same motivations. Yes, winning basketball games was important or is important, but helping these young men, these boys, become men was probably the most important.
right?
And what I learned quickly is we were told when I took the position that all Howard had to do was to show improvement from the previous year, and then he would keep his job. So I rolled the dice with him, knowing the team we had, knowing the assistant coaches we had, that would be the case. And we did that. We won more games than he had in the previous 2 years. We went further in the what conference, whatever the conference is. We went further in the conference tournament than they had in the previous years. Academically, the guys had done better than they had done in the previous years, and he was still fired. So that showed me that, okay, this isn't about this. There's a lot of politics behind this and things of this nature. So, and Jim kept me on. The athletic director kept me on. And then they brought in Steve McLean. Now, I wasn't one of Steve's guys, but I think there's a way you treat people
Right.
that should supersede whether I'm your guy or not.
Yes.
So that year was not a good year, to say the least. And I did all I could to smooth over the relationship, to work with him, to, and to be quite honest, I was the only person that was loyal to him. The other people weren't, but yet I was the one being treated like crap.
Right.
So at the end of that year, I decided, you know what? I don't need this. I'm fortunate enough. I've made and saved enough money that, I can look for another job and have some cushion. As Coach Collins said, do what you want to do and not what you have to do. I didn't have to do that.
Right.
But again, was picked up quickly by the Big Ten, was picked up quickly by the Department of Education. The College of Education. And just decided to start doing the things that made me happy. And that also allowed me to spend time and watch my daughter, who was playing basketball at Neuqua Valley at that time. I could go and watch her games and be a part of what's going on with her. And then, of course, my second daughter that was coming up after her in her sports life. Because with Steve McLean, he'd go see his son play, but I wasn't allowed to go see my daughter play. And I'm like, no, this
Right.
ain't, no.
Yeah.
So that was it.
Right.
It was just time to step aside.
Right. A couple quick things about that. First of all, you'd think you're Deon Thomas. You think he'd be thrilled to have you as a resource. But second of all, like you said, life's too short to do things that make you unhappy. Especially if you're in a situation where, like you are, where you can, you're Deon Thomas. So people are obviously there's going to be a lot of opportunities for you outside of that. So yeah, but well, with your analyst hat here, actually, okay, I got one more for you. Bigger adjustment. High school to college to pro, or player to analyst? What's the hardest out of those three?
I got one for you. It's not even player to analyst. It's player to real life.
Yeah, you're right. Okay.
That's the hardest adjustment, I believe, for any athlete or someone that has been an athlete for their entire life. I think this is why we have as many guys that are depressed, that go broke, all of those things, and trying to figure out that adjustment from player to person is what's different. And I call it real life, because when we were athletes, everyone did things for you. I mean, when I had to register for classes. Most normal students are going around trying to register every class. Our classes were done for us. We didn't have to go pick up books. They were waiting in the office for us. As a
Mm-hmm.
professional player, I didn't have to pay bills. My agents did it for me. And then to adjust from having all of these people around do things for you to you having to do it for yourself, John, that is the biggest adjustment in life. And I think
Yeah.
I know a lot of guys, and I don't know if girls struggle as much as guys, but I know there are a lot of guys that struggle with it, because I talk to them. I talk
Mm-hmm.
to them when they're finishing their careers. I talk to them when they're finished their college and professional careers on how to just re-enter society. So that's the biggest fight. As far as being an analyst, I don't find that to have been hard or difficult. Um, you give so many interviews throughout your career, especially if you were in a situation where I was, like I was as a player. You're giving interviews all the time. The knowledge you pick up as a player, then myself as a coach, easily allows you to transition those things into being an analyst. Now, I'll say the most difficult thing is just learning timing, learning when to get in, when to get out, taking cues. I didn't do much teleprompter reading, where I could see where that could be difficult. Just, being on pace with people talking in your ears half the
Oh, I
time.
can't imagine that. Yeah.
So I mean that took some getting used to, but from player to analyst, I don't think was very difficult, especially because I had some great guys, whether it was Refson or those guys over at the Big Ten Network, or whether it was Brian Barnhart. I had great teachers and great guys to help me get along with it. It's just takes repetition.
Right.
Changing lives is even more difficult.
Yeah. All right. Well, a couple here. I'll finish up here with a couple quick ones, but analyst hat here. Who wins between 89 and 05?
89.
Okay. Nice.
And I get into this. I've had this conversation with D Brown. As much as
I'm sure he loves your answer.
oh no, well of course D pushed back.
Yeah.
Which he should. He's supposed to.
Right.
But I mean, if you look at those teams from top to bottom, the 89 team was far too big, far too athletic, and far too deep.
Yes.
I mean, Luther. As much as I love Luther and D, Darren was a good college player. He was a great professional player.
Yes.
None of the guys on the interior would have been able to deal with Kenny Battle or Lowell Hamilton. They just wouldn't have.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Andy Kaufman barely got off the bench, and he was in high school was a 40-point game score, and a 20-point could have been an easily 20-point per game score in college basketball. They just didn't have the size,
Right.
or really the athleticism.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good answer. Okay. Another one. Now, I had Marcus Griffin on here, and I met him in Champaign. I was driving him back, and I started asking him all these questions. And I was like, damn, I should have just asked these while we were on the pod. But he sticks up for his O1 team big time, obviously.
Yeah.
So do you think, how about 0-1 against this team last year that just made it to the Final Eight?
Ooh. Oh, that's really good. That would have been a great game.
Yeah.
And, I'll tell anyone this. Terrence Shannon Jr., great, great, great player.
Right.
Love Marcus Damask. Really like Coleman Hawkins. I wish he would have played to his fullest potential.
Right.
Frankie Williams is one of the best players I've ever seen in my life.
Yes.
And then you
You know,
surround him with the rest of the guys that were on that team. I'd have to go with them.
gotcha. Yeah. Sometimes you forget how good Frankie was, and I'm guilty of that too because I even we had I had a buddy and we did like a Illini draft from 2000 to present, and I can't remember which one of us took him, but took him way too late. You know, hell, he was the Big Ten Player of the Year one year, and you know, I don't know, for some reason he just kind of forget how great he was. I think sometimes, but
Because he just didn't do huge numbers. You know,
right.
Frankie, everyone else around him better. And that's what your guards do, your point guards do. Now, yes, he put up points, but he made everyone else around him better. And that's why that team flowed and played so well. But yeah, I can see how he could get forgotten about. But, you know, you, like others, being an inside guy, you won't forget.
Right. Okay, I'm gonna ask you one more here. It's Marcus again. He's very protective of his 0-1 team. Could 0-1 beat 0-5, or who would you take 0-1 against 0-5?
I'd still have to say, that's a really tough one. In one game, maybe 0-5.
Yeah.
In one game. If I had to do it over a series, then I'd probably take 0-1.
Yeah, because I think that
game 0-5.
That post depth might just kind of beat them down over like a 7-game series or something.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah. Those are. It was funny. Yeah, everybody's, and they should be, as they should be. Everybody's got their defends their group whenever you talk to them. So I was just curious your thoughts. But
well, all three of them would have kicked my team's ass. So it's.
I know. I was going to ask you those, and I was like, man, should I mention one of his teams? I don't want to offend him or anything, but
I'll tell you this. My freshman year and my senior year, I think we could have given them a run. The only reason I say they would have won my senior year is because we were young. Kewan Garris, Jerry Hester both played huge roles with us, but they were young.
Right.
And so I think they may have gotten us then. My freshman year team with myself, Larry Smith, Andy Kaufman, we would have given them a run.
Right.
But, you know, I think those two teams had more depth than we did. And so that would have been our Achilles heel.
Gotcha. All right. Well, this has been amazing, but I usually finish these off here lately. I grab my son. He's 7, and I have him ask a question. So you mind if I grab him real quick so you can answer?
Of course.
Okay. All right. Just a second here. Hey, Stevie. Come here, buddy. Okay. Can you tell Deon hi?
Hi.
Hi, Stevie. How are you, big guy?
Good.
Good.
Okay. You got a question for him?
What's your favorite NBA team?
Oh, my favorite NBA team. Of course, Stevie, being from Chicago, my favorite NBA team is the Chicago Bulls. And then having grown up in the era of Michael Jordan, which was a very long time ago, he's not the shoes that you wear. Tell your dad to put some tape on for you. But the Bulls would be my favorite team, and which also gives me a chance to cheer for Ayo Dosunmu.
Right. Exactly. All right. What do you tell him?
Thank you.
You're welcome, Stevie. Take care, bud.
I will.
Okay. All right. Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much, man. This has been great. So, yeah, thanks for sharing everything. I'll get a hold of you here a little later on, let you know when I'll put it out a little closer to time. It'll be pretty soon, but yeah, man, this has been great. Everything we're talking about now, I'll probably end up better now because now we're just kind of talking. But yeah, thanks a lot, man. This has been awesome.
No problem. Just when you release it, just tag me so I'll make sure it's on my sites as well.
Yeah, well, I'll mention you and tag you and all that, and yes, for sure, because yeah, this will be a good one. So, thank you so much, man.
All right, anytime.
All right, thanks, bud. See you later.
Bye bye.